Welcome to the Midlife Midsters podcast, your podcast for inspiration on being bold and saying yes to making the most of midlife.
Okay, so Carmen and Marianne, we're going to play a little game. It's a variation of the game Never Have I Ever. Do you guys know how to play that?
Oh, yes.
All right.
But we can't really do that here.
Please not.
No, but we can do a variation. And the idea is to explore what the limits of our adventurous spirits are. So I'm going to throw out a question and we're each going to answer it.
Okay.
The first question is, I have once in my adult life done what? What's the most adventurous thing you've done in your adult life?
Jumped out of an airplane.
Skydiving, or you just jumped because you didn't like the
No, skydiving. Yes, I did that once.
When did you do that?
I was in my 20s. I was probably like 27 or 28. Yeah, that was pretty adventurous.
What about older, in your 40s, 50s?
Most of my stuff, I mean, having kids and stuff, my adventures were not really about that kind of adventure. It was more like we'd be traveling and we'd just kind of go for the day and do whatever. My stuff was more like work stuff, which now I kind of wish I'd done more adventurous stuff in my personal life, but I was always kind of pushing the envelope there more than I was at home. So once I had kids, it definitely tampered my adventurous side, because I actually was I remember when my kids were little thinking to myself, I'm not going to get drunk because what if something happens in the middle of the night and I have to take care of them? So it definitely tamped things down. So we'll talk about from here forward, but it definitely tamped things down once I had kids.
How about you, Marianne?
Okay. Adventurous things in adulthood. Okay. So adventurous would be like taking risk or doing something out of the ordinary, right?
Out of your ordinary.
Out of my ordinary.
Which is already.
I think in adult years, so those are a lot of years to cover, but in the most recent years, 2022, I took on a course and all the time and all the learning to get my captain's license.
That was pretty cool.
I think that, I don't know about taking risk. I guess risk that you might not pass or be able to obtain that because it's very hard. And then the other thing would be, I had an idea in 2017 called American Midsters. And it was the idea of being able to inspire other women, as well as myself, to doing adventurous things. So your question, I love your question. I did trademark and do that in 2017, didn't do much with it. And then with a couple of other ladies, mainly you across the we decided to do a podcast. Carmen, Marla, who's not here. So I think it was adventurous to start a business at my age, decide to do a podcast at my age, invite my friends to do it with me, and I'm still going forward with that. So that's probably the most adventurous thing that I've done in recent years, those two things.
I said that, and then I was like, oh, yeah, I did start a business 7 years ago. That's adventurous. I was like, and then I'm on my second business that I started 6 months ago. So actually, that's
work
pretty,
thing.
But it's the work thing. And maybe that's why I was sort of like, is that adventurous? But it really is, because it's very adventurous and it's risky. I worked away from a very lucrative profession in order to do that.
So my adventures, I've never looked at them as monetary. I know I just said that we're doing a podcast and doing a business. I still don't look at it monetary. There is goal-oriented, a thrill of doing something. And also I get so much energy from other people. I look for opportunities when it comes to adventure, to doing things. So I wouldn't be one that would just jump out of a plane and skydive. That to me it's a risk. It's nothing that fills my soul, adventure-wise at all.
I really wanted to do that. And the funny thing is,
it's great.
Once I did it, I was like, okay, I'm good.
Yeah.
I
won't be checking that off.
What about, I'm not doing it again. What about you, Leslie Ann?
Well, I will say two kinds of adventure. One, the most I think adventurous in that sense, like equivalent to jumping out of a plane, was actually almost by accident. But we were in France a number of years ago, about 10 years ago, dozen years ago. And we were with friends, and they talked us into doing a hot air balloon ride over the Alps, which I really wanted to do because photography has led me into so many adventurous things. And I really wanted to take some cool pictures from the balloon. And it was fabulous, absolutely fabulous for about 40 of the 45 minutes of the flight. And then in the last 5 minutes, the pilot suddenly said, and by the way, it was me, my husband, my son, and my friend's son. My friend and her husband and our 2 daughters were in another balloon. And they had sort of drifted off in another direction. So we're up there and we're floating around, and it's absolutely gorgeous. And we're flying over a gorge with trees on either side. And the pilot suddenly said, I need you all to look for a flat field that we can land this thing on. And I was like, oh, you don't have a landing pad? He was like, no, because I never know where we're going to go. It depends on the wind. We usually find a flat place to land. I'm like, that does not sound very encouraging. And then the next minute, he was like, okay, we're about to run out of gas. We're putting this down on the road.
Oh, my gosh.
And we were up.
It's flat.
We were up in the Alps, and we landed the balloon on, I'm kidding you not, on a hairpin turn on this little road. And when we hit the tarmac, the basket flipped, and we all fell out onto the road. And then it popped back up, and then the pilot was quick, get the silk off the road. So we were scrambling, trying to get the balloon part.
Be like, you get the silk off the road. I'm going to stand on the
You find yourself in very precarious situations.
And it's always because I want a good picture. Right? So, I deserved the glass of champagne I got after that trip. So I would say that was the most adventurous thing, but I didn't intend for it to be. It just happened. But there have been lots of other things having to do with photography, just going different places.
And you and me both.
Yeah, forcing myself to go out of my comfort zone a lot because I want to see and experience something. And that's been kind of a lot of fun.
I look for opportunities every day in adventure, though. And I think you do too, probably. I mean, we're near Gulf Branch Park and all that. So I always look for alternate ways of going places. I'm curious. So curiosity takes me to adventure. And then I'm very sensory. So I find sensory things adventurous as well. So it's hearing the animals, it's listening to the water, it's sensory. It's even like walking on the leaves. That is adventurous to me. So it doesn't have to be like risk taking, even though I know that's the definition. But I find those things adventurous as well.
So it's funny you say that because for me, this is not adventurous, but I observe that most people my age and definitely most women don't do this kind of thing. So we were in Deep Creek Lake for a friend's 50th birthday party, and they had the pontoon boat out, and they were hauling one of the rafts. I've done this with you, actually, behind the boat. And my husband was like, you have to let the kids go first. And I was like, do I really? Do I really have to let the kids go first? Like, really? Like, can I go? And I seriously, after all the kids are gone, I said to John, who's our friend, I was like, can I go? And he's like, you want to go? I'm like, So and you and I've done that. We've been on the ski boat but I do find
canoes
and
kayaks together.
I do find that most of my girlfriends are not interested in being towed on the tube. And I'm like, and it's funny because I remember getting in the water and they said, so tell us when you want to get off. And I'm like, no, you actually have to tell me when you want me to get off because I will never get off. Or like, oh, this was a good one. It was last August. I went out to Colorado because my daughter was going to college there. And she and I decided with 2 of her friends to go tubing. And tubing in Colorado is really different than tubing on the East Coast. It's cold, comes from the mountain. It's very narrow. It's not like our big rivers like the Shenandoah River, the Potomac River. So the 4 of us go tubing. We get down the river, and it's kind of cool. You go up in a park, you hike up, and then you go down. And so it's pretty cold that day because it was kind of cloudy. So I turn to the 2 boys and to my daughter, and I say, do y'all want to go again? And they're kind of like, my daughter says to them, no, you don't understand. My mom wants to go again. They were like, if you don't want to go again, you need to tell her. And they're like, okay, we'll go again. So we go again. We get out and I go, do y'all want to go again? And the 3 kids are like, no.
But you did.
Oh yeah, I would have gone all day.
Yeah.
Like,
well, you know, I love tubing, and we tube together. I mean, there's nothing like a good tube and somebody just taking that boat and doing circles and going over the wake.
so to me, it's not that adventurous, but I think to other people,
It's a
sometimes
thrill, though.
It's totally.
Adventurous, though, is pushing outside your comfort zone, right? The other thing I've done that I would consider adventurous is for a while before the pandemic, which break my heart that we don't do this anymore, but we used to travel at work. So when when I would be doing an investigation, I would have to go to another state, another city, and I like to travel. And I also have a goal of seeing all 50 states, but I have standards. You can't just see, you have to stay in the state and experience hospitality there. So you have to spend the night, you have to have meals. So what I was doing is every time I had a trip out of town, I would go out, I would arrange to do my interviews on like Monday or Tuesday, and I would fly out on Saturday or Sunday, rent a car, and just drive around. And I had an incredibly beautiful experience in Montana. I flew to Montana. I was all by myself. And I rented a car, and I got up at 4 a.m. so I could see the sunrise, and just drove in the direction of something that looked like it might be an interesting place to see the sunrise. Got some beautiful images. But more than that, just had such an incredible day. I drove from 4 a.m. till 5 p.m. all by myself, stopped and had a bite to eat, caught the sunset, and went to bed. And like being alone on the road, the open road, in the car, just looking for something pretty, it was an amazing experience. And I consider that adventurous.
So
that's very adventurous.
Also, jumping in the Penobscot Bay at 55 degrees.
That's true.
You did that too.
I was the one who started it, and then the 20-somethings were following me into Penobscot Bay. I was we
had a challenge.
Right, just so our listeners know what we're talking about, the Penobscot Bay, which is where we do our annual sailing trip. It is cold in June when we go. And 2 years ago, I guess, Carmen and some of the youngins jumped off the boat into the water.
And I went first, and they were like, "Oh, well, if she's going, then I guess we have to." Yeah, I actually got in Copenhagen Harbor in April when I was there 2 years ago, and it was 45 degrees.
And you got in.
Oh yeah, it was great.
You feel it with your body that.
Yeah, you do. You got to. You got to get out.
Yeah,
And you know the sailing trip. I mean, you've been on it. We do it every year. That's adventurous.
It is adventurous.
I mean, it's not risk. It's a nice big 130 foot, but it's still you're getting into rowboats. You're going to places you've never been before. You'll do some hiking.
A week on a boat with other women, some of whom you know and some of whom you don't. And that's an adventure.
True.
It's an adventure.
True.
So I have a question for y'all. Who here is or is not an adventurous eater?
Oh, you know what? That's a great question. I used to not be. I was such a picky eater growing up, but I have become much more adventurous. I really like to try different things.
What's some of the weirdest food you've eaten?
Ooh. Well, I have to tell a little story. Do tell. When I was much younger, I tried an oyster, and I didn't like it at all. Like, I don't know what I didn't like about it. I was so young, maybe in my early 20s. And so it was just a hard no. And I would see people eat oysters, especially out here on the East Coast. And I was recently up in Maine, and a photographer we were with organized, Leslie Ann was with me, a trip to an oyster farm to harvest oysters, to eat oysters for lunch, the whole thing. And I'm like, I'm game for the photography. I'm game for the culture and to learn about this, but I am not game about eating an oyster. It's not going to happen. And lo and behold, an hour and a half later, I am popping those babies like nobody's business and enjoying it. So I did have like hard nose. That has changed me. So I think I'm going to be much more adventurous in my eating. And most people probably won't think oysters is adventurous eating. But for me, it absolutely was.
And I can tell you that I can't tell you what I've eaten. That's the strangest thing I've ever eaten, because I've eaten in places where I just ate what was in front of me.
And you didn't know what it was?
I didn't know what it was.
Wow.
So I think, so I grew up a very adventurous eater because we traveled a lot. Like I said, my father was from Honduras, so we'd go to Honduras, and it's the same thing. You kind of eat what's put in front of you. But recently I had a wonderful experience with my daughter. I was in Las Vegas with her, and there's this unbelievable taco. It's the best taco I've ever had in my life. It's actually a company that was founded in Tijuana. And you go in and it's on the strip. There's a local version, but it's on the strip, like a little bit off the strip. And basically you get in line for pork, you get in line for beef, and you can get in line for brains and tongue.
Oh, no.
So my daughter had heard that the tongue was actually the best thing. And I turned to her and I was like, should we try it? She said, yeah. I don't love organ meat. Like, I love pate and stuff like that, but I don't really like, other organ meat. So I go and I get the taco, and we got, I can't remember what it was called, but it's a thicker corn tortilla with cheese on it. And then they put the tongue and whatever else. We go back, Isabel and I split it in half. We take one bite and the two of us are like, we've been missing out for our real lives. It was the best thing I ate all weekend.
Oh,
so
wow.
You never know.
I guess you just have to not think about it too much.
Yeah, exactly. You
what it
kind
is
of
that you're
do. Like
eating.
after a while, I was like, oh my gosh, this is beef tongue. But it was delicious.
Yeah.
Like absolutely delicious.
My family spent a year in Singapore and a year in Indonesia while I was growing up. And so my mother always took the cooking classes. And so she makes a great curry. She makes something called barme.
Oh, that's cool.
I mean, yeah, neat food. And so I grew up kind of adventurous eating like that. My mother wasn't a great cook, but even like in Scotland, mutton and different foods, blood sausage, that kind of stuff, I ended up having to eat because it's what my mother would serve at times. And so I didn't necessarily love it, but did eat it. So I grew up kind of adventurous.
I do draw the line at eggs, as you know.
I do know.
You don't like eggs?
I don't eat eggs. Okay, next question. What's the most adventurous thing you think you will do? Like, what's on your plate that you'd like to do as a challenge to yourself?
You go first.
Okay. Okay. Just to think about this for a minute, there are quite a few things that I would like to do that maybe people wouldn't think is adventurous for them, but is adventurous for me. I definitely have a lot of curiosity. I told you, like, even the adventurous, like going out in leaves. I love all that, water, rain, you name it. One thing that I've never done that I want to do that is adventurous to me is scuba diving.
Oh.
I am so curious about what's under the sea. I mean, I watch a lot of films. I love documentaries on it. I've just never done it. I have vertigo, so I've always been a little worried about it. I'm not claustrophobic, but I've just never had the opportunity to do it. Now I actually know somebody that will teach me how to scuba dive. I've got to do all the online things. So I think that is probably the most adventurous thing I see in my future. That I haven't done yet.
For me, it's kind of half done, but it's something I'm going to make sure I see to completion. We've talked before about I love stories and that I want to write a book, and I've never done that, which that's another thing I'd like to do. But from an adventure point of view, I recently had a conversation with a friend who told me that she goes to see the recordings of The Moth. Do you know what The Moth is?
Yeah.
Okay. So The Moth is the storytelling hour. And I guess I've listened to The Moth. I love The Moth. I think The Moth is great, but it really never struck me that they record it somewhere. And apparently they record them in different cities all throughout the country, and including here in DC. So my friend Joanne was like, we have to go together to a recording of The Moth. Well, the idea really hit me hard that this is something I should do. And I didn't want to wait to coordinate with her. So I happened to be going to California, and I saw that they were going to be doing a recording of The Moth in LA while I was there. So I went and I actually signed up to tell a story, but I didn't get picked. I know, I was bummed.
Sad.
I had a good story.
Next city.
But I'm gonna sign up for the next one and the next one after that until I get to tell a story. I really want to do that. I think it would just really feel good to do that.
You know, you're talking about that adventure, and you should absolutely do it because you have that skill, you have that talent. You should definitely optimize that. For me, with scuba diving, I don't have that skill. I don't have that talent. So it's a little more of a risk. You'll come out smelling like roses. I'm not sure how I'll come out.
But however I come out, I'll have done it.
Yeah.
And I'm really out for not the applause at the end or what they rank you, like they score each speaker. I don't really care what people think of what I have to say. I just want to get up there and do it. And honestly, it should be easy for me because I gave closing arguments in court for years.
Yeah.
I can get up in front of a group of people
Right.
and talk,
Yeah.
which is why I'm interested in doing it in a creative way.
Yeah, you'll be excellent.
I think you'll be amazing at scuba diving because you're a nurse and I'm actually certified, but I don't really like it that much.
In scuba, you're
ironically.
certified?
Mhm.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. And my husband loves it. Like, and so when we were dating, I got certified, but it's very interesting. You can't swim when you're scuba diving. You have to kind of float around.
Right.
And I hated it. I just didn't
Well,
really
you,
like
you don't like stillness.
I
so
don't
much.
like stillness so much, which is something I'm working on. But
Well, I'm definitely gonna try it.
so you should try it. But for me, I was like, eh. But the reason you'll be really good at it is because to be good at scuba, you do need to look at the calculations and the time, and
The math.
You're great at
Yeah,
that stuff.
I'll
So
be
I
fine.
think you'll be really good at it.
Yeah, I mean that's what I want to do. I want to live abroad for a year too. That would be another
Oh,
thing,
me
and I
too.
think that's an adventure. That's an adventure because you're kind of starting over and learning things, and it's that curiosity. It's personal growth. So that yeah. What about you?
So in my case, I don't want to go too deep in this, but I don't know if this is an adventure, but my life has changed a lot over the last year. And I think the work that I've done on myself has been a really incredible and really, really difficult adventure. So I think when I come not out of this, but when some of these things get resolved, I think I'm going to have a better sense of the things that I want to do after that because it has really occupied so much of my mental and emotional space over the last year that I haven't really had besides taking care of my family, taking care of myself, having a job, I haven't really had the space to think about what do I want to do in this next chapter? My kids also just left home a year ago.
Right.
So I think there's a lot of getting used to this next chapter of my life.
Was there anything even prior to this year that you wanted to do that was adventurous though?
This is going to sound kind of sad, but I don't mean it that way. I don't think I spent a lot of time wanting things.
Yeah.
And so I think as I have gone through this transformation, one of the things that I'm spending some time thinking about is what do I actually want? I was very much a person who finished high school, went to college, got a job, went to graduate school, got a job, raised kids, got married, raised kids, And I sort of followed this path and I actually like all of those things. I'm very glad that I have a family, but I didn't spend a lot of time thinking about what do I like or what do I want.
Right.
And so I think that's going to be my next adventurous chapter is kind of figuring that out.
Well, I actually think raising kids is adventurous.
It's very
that's one of
adventurous.
the biggest adventures
Adventurous.
yeah, of my entire life was that. And I think that that's what's nice about our age right now. The children are gone and they've grown up, and we can think about these other adventures outside of that because I really wanted to create adventures for them, an opportunity of adventures. And now we kind of can focus on
As
ourselves.
you know, though, we're planning a family adventure for Christmas. We're all going away, and I also would like to live abroad for a year. But one of the challenges to that is I would have to take the dog. I can't leave my dog, so we're going away at Christmas. We're actually taking the dog. And that's going to be a little adventure because we're going to Canada, we're going to Quebec City. It'll be interesting seeing what it's like traveling with her and with the whole family. So, a part of that adventure is I need to step back from being party planner extraordinaire. Like other people are going to have to take the lead on this. And actually having the dog there is going to help with that because she's going to be part of my focus.
Yeah.
But it'll be interesting to see how it goes traveling abroad with a dog.
What was I know you had another question for us.
The last question is the never have I ever, but it's really never would I ever. Where do you draw the line? Because you know what? Sometimes you have to say, I have limits and I need to respect them. So is there something that you would never do that people might have urged you to do or it might have crossed your mind? And you just think, I got to draw the line
A couple
there.
things.
I have a couple
I think
things.
being a nurse too, especially when I was doing my clinicals, the one clinical that just kind of shocked me and made me just take pause was the neuro ICU. And they were motor vehicle accidents.
Motorcycles.
And jumping off cliffs, doing things like that. So what would I never do? It would be bungee jumping because of spine and neck. It would be climbing high altitudes because of altitude sickness. And then the one thing that I really, really, really want to do, but I will never do it because I've read too much about it and there's too much risk, which you would be surprised. I want a storm chase. Like, I want to be a storm chaser. I love weather. I'm the type of person that stands out in the rain just to feel it. So I want a storm chase so bad, but the more I read about it, actually the risk in the accidents is motor vehicle accidents because it's wet, it's windy, no visibility. That is the risk. It's not like getting caught up in a tornado. It is all this other stuff. But that is what I would never do, but I have to tell you, I want to do it so bad.
So mine are sort of like yours. And as I've gotten older, like the risk of physical injury now, it's like coming back from that is just a lot harder than it was in your teens or your 20s or even your 30s. So for me, never motorcycles. I mean, my father was a doctor too. He was like, don't ever let me catch you riding a motor, because he would see the aftermath of motorcycle accidents. So never motorcycles. I actually did jump off a cliff. I forgot about that 2 summers ago with my husband in Idaho.
That's the small thing to do.
I've done it, but I won't do it again.
Yeah, I did. It wasn't that high. And as a matter of fact, for the first time in my life, like as a kid, I would have been like, the higher the better. And now I'm sort of like, that kind of hurts. I'm not doing that. I wouldn't do bungee jumping. I probably wouldn't jump out. I wouldn't jump out of a plane again. Like it's like the juice isn't worth the squeeze. It's a little bit like it's mostly physical stuff at this point. Yeah. Like even I would snow ski, but I could ski pretty aggressive slopes at one point in my life. I probably wouldn't do that anymore because I'm not a good enough skier to do it. So I would do it for fun. But yeah, it's mostly the physical stuff, I think.
I think also as we get older, well, I was always like this a little bit. Adventure isn't about thrill for me. Like that.
Oh, I have a big thrill.
I mean, exercise and there's some thrill, but not like I am not going to substitute a thrill for injury. Like that's just not important to me. No, going out on lobster boat's a thrill to me. There's certain adventurous things, but it's just not, but people do risk their lives every day for thrill. Yeah. They're thrill seekers. They're adrenaline junkies. Yeah. I've never really been that.
I'm not.
I've always been on the cusp of that, but then I say to myself, it's like my smart brain kicks in and says, "Don't do that."
Yeah. I'm not that. I'm not really a thrill seeker either. I mean, around the edges. Like I said, I went up in a hot air balloon, and there was a time in my 40s where I was obsessed with doing backflips off the diving board, which, considering I'm not the most athletic person, was a bit of a thrill seeking thing. But for me, the thing is travel, because I love travel. Mm-hmm. And if I could, well, when I was 20, I would have said, I want to see the entire world.
Yeah.
But there are now countries that I know I will never see. I don't want to expose myself to the risk of what could happen in certain places.
I feel the exact same way. And I grew up going to Honduras and places like that in the 80s, and it was not particularly safe. And I'm not really all that interested in that.
Yeah. I just have to draw the line somewhere. I still want to go to all 7 continents. I think that's achievable. But there are definitely countries within those continents that are just a no-go. So like when I was in college, I lived across the street from Anna Anderson, who was the woman who claimed that she was Grand Duchess Anastasia.
No way.
Yeah. And I was fascinated by her. I read all about her. That was before it was debunked. She was not Grand Duchess Anastasia. But at the time, people really wondered if she was.
So interesting.
And I became very interested in Russian history and, the Romanovs and, the fall of the Tsar and all that, and really, really, really wanted to go to Russia. And now that is it is not a place I will ever
not on my
I'm glad I went list. I went before all this.
Yeah.
Did you went?
Yeah, we went to St. Petersburg. Oh, it was absolutely beautiful.
I'm sure it's beautiful.
We did a lot in the Baltic, and
I just would not risk that.
I would not now. Oh
no, I wouldn't either.
Yeah, this was several years ago.
I remember, speaking of countries being dangerous, I was 10 and we were in Honduras and we were driving from my grandmother's house in the capital out to this little town on the Nicaraguan border. And this is probably like 1981, 1982. And my sister and I, like, they stopped some military people stopped the car that we were driving in. We didn't talk to my mom a lot when we were in Honduras. It was really, because my parents were divorced. It was very expensive to call back, etc. So they stopped us. They searched our car. They had big machine guns, the whole deal. So a few days later, I remember for some reason my father let us call my mom, and we were talking on there, and my sister was about 7 or 8, and she goes, so we were going to see cousin Gustavo, and these monkeys searched our car. My mother's like, monkeys searched your car? What are you talking about? My mother's like, gorillas? Marcia was like, yeah, gorillas. My mother was like, oh my God. Yeah. So I'm like, I have no desire to repeat any of that in my travels now at this age.
Yeah. You grew up doing adventurous things then, it sounds like, because your family. Me too. I mean, I look at pictures. I can't believe my parents let me look at these pictures, but I'm just this little girl gnawing on chicken feet in Singapore. I'm like, how dare? But I think even though I don't remember that, I wouldn't choose to do that now. But it just led to kind of this adventurous type life. And honestly, when my father moved us all to Arkansas from Sydney, Australia, and I'm seeing country people out in the fields doing stuff with cows and pigs and all of that, that also was adventurous in my mind, you know, because it was so different. So I lived adventurously, and I knew that, like, there was risk to that, and I knew that was not the norm, at least my norm, coming from Sydney, Australia. So I seek those things out now because it's just a part of me, and it makes life interesting.
You know, what's interesting about that is, like, I went from one suburban community outside of Chicago to another outside of New York. I just not live an adventurous childhood.
But you are adventurous because you're always willing to try new things. And I think if you don't have an adventurous spirit, there's nothing you would say no to, almost, that I would say, hey, let's go do this.
But it comes from, it's interesting because it comes from within. That is not something that I learned.
Yeah, you went away to college even, like left your state. It was big adventurous.
Yeah.
I grew up sort of like you did. I mean, I did not grow up in a suburb, or I mean, there was a time where we lived in a suburb, but mostly I lived in the country, and my father was from a foreign country. So that was very unusual that we were so well traveled, because first, people just didn't travel as much in the 70s and 80s as they do today. And then I was from a small town in the South, so people didn't really do that. So we were kind of unusual. And then my mother wasn't from Georgia. She was from West Texas. And so that was like a whole set of adventures, was the farm. You know, my grandfather would let me drive the truck on the farm when I was 8. You know, it was like no big deal. And to me, that was fun, like picking peas and shelling peas and walking with my cousin down to my mother grew up in a town of like 900, it's now like 700 people, but it was like 900 people when I was a kid. My cousin and I would go down to the elementary school and like listen to all the gossip from the other kids on the playground. So that we were very, like, it was a different childhood than my children grew up.
Well, I think now's the time, like here in midlife, we have the time and the capacity to be adventurous and do different things, from the smallest things to the biggest things. And I think, like, finding other women, like just talking to you guys, you've opened my eyes to different adventurous things that I want to do. I want to write too, but I don't write like you, but I think my family story is very interesting. And then I loved how you were so honest in talking about not being able to actually see the adventures that might be ahead of you because of where you are right now. But I can't wait to see what you actually end up doing, because I think it's going to be fantastic and maybe something I might want to jump in and do with you too.
I'm starting to get excited about it. I think there's a lot there. And I think one of the things I really want to do is, I was a pretty creative kid. I drew a lot. Like I drew a lot, and I would, like, my grandmother taught me how to sew, so I would do some of that. And I wrote a lot. I wrote a ton of poetry in high school. It's probably terrible. Who cares? But there's definitely, I've lost a lot of my creativity, and I would like to get that back. To me, that feels adventurous. Like, for me, letting myself go a little bit is actually very adventurous, because I can do it physically, but I can't really do it creatively.
And I think that's a great place to wrap up, because I think a piece of advice to people is exactly that. if you want to be more adventurous, open yourself up.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what it is that you value or that you have valued in the past and find a path into that. And be willing to say yes to a lot of things. That's our mantra.
And live boldly.
And live boldly, but also know when you need to say no. Because pushing yourself too far is just going to spoil the whole process. So be open to the things that you really think you can do and really want to do.
Sounds good.
Yeah, I hope you all have enjoyed this episode. And don't forget to follow us on our website, AmericanMidsters.com. Leave a comment if you'd like. And we have an Instagram and a Facebook. And we would love to hear from our fond fans.